Entrepreneurship will uncover every unresolved issue from your childhood. Mm. So that is a post that Mark Coley made. And when I tell you, when I saw that, I literally wanted to throw my shoe, okay? Because it is so true. And so I really kind of wanted to dive into that, at least like what that looks like for me, like what from my childhood have I kind of discovered is still affecting me through entrepreneurship in this episode of Beyond Her Hustle. Beyond Her Hustle is a podcast, it's a brand that I created in order to really just create a safe space to learn how to ditch the hustle culture, to start to really find healing and peace and fulfillment, to really just start to walk more in purpose and build wealth on the way. So, this is my journey. I mean, if you are someone who might be dealing with some similar things that I've gone through as being a high earning woman, I definitely want you guys to just tap in and join the community. You can find us pretty much on every social media platform. Again, this is really a safe space. I'm not selling anything. I'm not trying to, have you join a course or a program. This is something new that I have recently decided to do because I realize that there's a lot of entrepreneurs and professionals that have been so focused on their career and hustle culture that we realize that there is so much missing. And so this is really just me kind of working through some of my own challenges that I've had in hopes that it'll help or inspire someone who is watching or listening. So back to this post. Again, it says entrepreneurship will uncover any unresolved issue from your childhood. And it's crazy because I never knew the effects of childhood trauma. I never even heard the word childhood trauma until probably a couple years ago. And I feel like when you think of trauma, you only think about, things that were extremely traumatic, like abuse, like from a parent. You're thinking about things like that, right? But I never realized that you can have trauma in many different ways, things that have affected you. And it's crazy because if you don't heal those things, I've learned that it's like there's still that child inside of you that will show up in certain circumstances in your adult life. And I've noticed that through entrepreneurship for me, with, I've grown a platform. I've been posting social media content, creating content since technically since 2018, but I literally posted my first video January 2019. So that's really when my journey like truly began when it comes to like video content creation. But I've been online, I've been on the internet, making videos about business and finances and money and business credit and all these things. And I never really thought too deeply about it. Kind of it is what it is, right? But then I realized that, I went viral in 2020. So it took like 2 years for me to really gain some like real traction. But I noticed that when I started to get the traction, like I went viral for the first time, it completely blew up my brand, which I'll definitely talk about that on another episode, all that went down with that. But it completely blew up my brand. But then I realized that it was almost like an addiction. Like, I don't know, it's going to sound so weird, but it was almost an addiction getting the likes and the shares and the comments like over and over, hitting 500,000 views, 1 million views. Like it was almost like an addiction, like a dopamine hit, literally. And I would be so excited and so happy for these viral videos, for the likes. And I was just creating content constantly. I was getting up and getting dressed, doing my makeup literally every single day to post content because I loved that. I love that. But then the algorithm does this thing sometimes, right? And then the views started to slow down and the engagement started to slow down. My following wasn't growing as quickly. And that really, really affected me mentally and emotionally. And I realized after some digging, actually recently, that has a lot to do with some of the things that I've gone through as a child. I didn't grow up in a very traumatic like childhood per se, but I can say that growing up in an area that I did, I grew up in Gilbert, Arizona, which if you've ever been to Gilbert, Arizona, you know that is not very diverse, okay? It's not diverse at all. You're typically going to have usually all white, majority of Mormon people. There's not a whole lot of minorities. There's some Hispanic in where I lived, and of course some Black, but it's just not a whole lot of diversity. Like a lot of times, I was the only Black kid in class, a lot, and there'd probably be like 10 Black kids total with the whole school, it seemed like. So it was not very diverse growing up at all. And honestly, that played a really, really big role in my self-esteem. Like I had terrible self-esteem issues growing up, especially being a darker skinned woman. My self-esteem was so bad. I did not like myself. I didn't like the way that I looked growing up. I felt like I was always the butt of people's jokes. You know how kids are in like middle school and whatnot, right? Like I was always the butt of the jokes. Like someone make a joke saying like, "Oh, that's your girlfriend," and they'd be like, "Oh, ew, ew, no." Like those types of instances really, really hurt my self-esteem. And then moving into, from going to middle school into high school, right? And then during high school, like you start to like boys and things like that, and you realize that no one really wants the tall, kind of chubby, dark skinned girl, right? And then even when I started to lose weight because I got into sports, even then it's like I was never the one that was like chosen. I never got attention is what I felt like. And so I noticed that kind of came back up in my entrepreneur journey because I loved feeling important. When I would post online and I would get a ton of engagement and views, that was really a like it's not the reason that I started posting videos, but I realized that it was part of the driving force that made me go so hard because it's like, wow, I feel important. I feel seen because I feel like for so long I really did not feel seen for real. And so I realized that played a really big role. And that's not a good thing because, like I said, when the views went down, the engagement went down, my following wasn't growing like it was. It's almost like I fell into this depression because of it, because I tied my self worth into how many likes I can get, how many views I can get. So when that went away or when it slowed down, I felt like my self-worth went down. And that's really a terrible mindset, a terrible perspective to have because it's a very dangerous perspective to have because truly, my self-worth has nothing to do with anything on the internet or what anybody thinks at all. But because I had never actually went back and looked at what could be possible, what are some things that I went through as a child that could be affecting the way that I operate today. And those are one of the things that I just never even realized had an effect on me until recently when I looked back and I'm like, wow, that is why I was feeling that way. But it's crazy because I feel like we don't really talk about these things. It's not like they're taught to us, right? There's not a whole lot of like business coaches and mentors that I know of that is actually going through this aspect of growing your business and making money. Because no matter how much money you make, it's just going to amplify who you are. It's not going to change you. It's not going to make you a better person. It's not going to heal you. It literally will just amplify who you already are. So when I started making a ton of money and I started going viral, that was just feeding into like my ego and me saying, well, like look at me now type of thing, right? It's almost like I was trying to prove people wrong. I was trying to show people that I am worth something because for so long, people made me feel like I wasn't. People made me feel like I was so little, so small, right? And so once I had the money and I had the attention and the views and the following, I used that to kind of boost my ego and almost as a crutch and as a mask. I never really confronted those feelings of insecurity that I had. And those are things that I'm still working through to this day. It's not something that, is just going to disappear overnight, but I'm getting a lot better at understanding that, like I said, the views, the likes, anything on social media really has nothing to do with my self-worth at all. And that's really just that's a really big part of my own, self-love healing journey. And it takes a lot of the pressure off as well. Like I don't think a year or two ago I would have even been able to start something like Beyond Her Hustle, right? Because I would have been too scared to even share these feelings. I was so scared to be vulnerable because I'm like, okay, people are not going to take me seriously as a business owner if I am telling people how I really feel, right? About being an influencer, being a content creator, being an entrepreneur. Like, if people actually know these things, if people know that I struggle with things, they're not going to trust me. But now that I'm going through the process of really going back and digging deeper and really trying to find myself and really trying to heal myself so that I can be more fulfilled and really follow my purpose, I'm realizing that that's not the truth. If people can't understand that I am human, if they can't understand that I am a real person outside of the content that I create on social media, then those are not my people. And that's why I needed to start Beyond Her Hustle. It was mostly, it's for me, not even mostly, it is for me. It is for me because I feel like this is an important process for me as someone who has been so public and vocal about a lot of things within my entrepreneurship journey, right? And I talk about a lot of my wins and the accomplishments. But I think it's important to talk about everything else as well, because it's not easy and it's hard to find people who really understand. Because a lot of times, if you tell people, oh, yeah, I made a lot of money and, I was feeling this way, people are going to be like, well, how can you be sad when you have everything that I am praying for, right? Like, you don't have to worry about the money and the bills and your brand is growing. Like, how can you be so, I don't know what the word is, so tone deaf, or how can you be so like shallow? How can you be so selfish, self-centered? Those are things that I told myself, like, I can't be vulnerable because people are going to think that I'm complaining about my situation. And that's not the truth. But I can also acknowledge that with money, with having a large following, comes a lot of other challenges. And challenges that are worth being talked about, because there are people that are taking their own life every single day who have everything. They seem to have it all, but you realize, like I said a dozen times before, money is not going to solve any of those things. It only amplifies who you are. And so I'm in the process of really learning who I am and really just trying to become better overall, holistically, I can't just focus on growing my business and not even focus on growing as a person, because that really is going to put a ceiling to my potential. And I really am focused on leaving that hustle culture. I don't want to have to work the hardest for the rest of my life in order to achieve material items or perceived success. Because a lot of the things that we do are for the perceived success. And I want to get out of that mindset. And I really just want to live a more fulfilled, a more purposeful life. And so understanding those things has been so helpful for me, honestly. Just kind of going back to things that have happened within my childhood instances and really understanding how they're affecting me now so that I can find different ways to cope with it, right? So that I can understand and remind myself, because every day is not perfect, right? And there's times that you're going to fall back into that old mindset. But at least now, when you're self aware, I'm able to remind myself that those things are not important, right? The likes, the shares, those things are not that important. Even the money. And it's crazy because the world that we live in, that's something that we need. But you start to realize that there's just certain things you're not willing to give up anymore for the money. And I'm kind of at that point right now. honestly. But that post really hit deep for me, and I'm sure that there's so many other things that have affected me throughout my journey through entrepreneurship and through my career. But that's really one of the main things that I've been working through recently. And it feels good to actually be able to like talk about it. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people with online brands, influencers, content creators who can probably relate to this, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. I don't know. But it feels good to actually be able to talk about it and to be able to really process my feelings around it. And, I hope that not just this episode, but just this brand overall is really an outlet for me, and I really pray that there is someone who is watching this or listening to it or finds, my platform and can understand that they're not the only one going through these things, and that's really just a goal, because Beyond Her Hustle is really all about finding that healing, learning how to ditch the hustle culture. I'm really, trying hard to ditch the hustle culture and just learning how to move more within my purpose so that I can feel more fulfilled and more happy with the things that I'm doing. And I'm, not just trying everything just to hustle for money, because that gets old, and it gets old fast. And I got so burnt out quickly. Okay. I got burnt out so fast, it's not even funny. But I appreciate you for tuning into this episode. You can find the full episodes and the clips pretty much on all platforms. You can hear the audio on all audio platforms. I'll be on YouTube. The video is on the Daily Pivot, and I'm also on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook under Beyond Her Hustle. All right. So I appreciate you for tuning in. I'm going to catch you on the next one.